This next panel is going to be really interesting. We're going to get back to focusing on healthy people and more of the facets that are included with focusing on our own personal health, processing experiences, and that is going to happen with this panel that is going to be moderated by Betty Aldworth from MAPS. So go ahead and come on up.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Betty Aldworth. I am co-executive director of the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, and joined by a panel. I'm not sure, are we doing the film first?
Yes, Betty. We're going to do
Great.
the film first. And actually, you might just want to have Joseph and Allie and Kat introduce themselves.
Perfect. Thank you, Don.
You're welcome.
So we'll start with introductions. Joseph.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist based in Los Angeles, a psychedelic-assisted therapist, researcher, educator, trainer. I've worked with MAPS in clinical trials since 2019, and currently I'm working with psilocybin and LSD in different clinical trials. I've also worked with ketamine in practice in Los Angeles, and I'm excited for this conversation.
I'm really honored to be here. My name's Allie, and I'm a licensed psychotherapist. I live in Laguna, but I practice in Costa Mesa, and for the last 3 years, I've been offering ketamine-assisted therapy in my practice, and I recently graduated from CIIS, and I'm working with some other medicines as well, and yeah, happy to be here.
Hello? All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Kat Gordon. I'm also from Laguna. Very excited to be here. I am an herbalist and a healing arts practitioner and a ceremonialist. I primarily work with ancient medicine traditions of the Andean and Amazonian regions, and I've been walking this path as a bridge between the ancient wisdom ways and modern life for about 15 years. So excited to be here talking and sharing about my personal journey and all of this beauty that we walk together.
And we're going to take a few moments to watch a short film about psychedelic integration that was produced by my organization as part of our mission to educate people about psychedelics, psychedelic harm reduction, and the potential benefits of psychedelics.
You love the thrill of it, the beauty of it, what it makes you feel, the connection to yourself. Is that all you're looking for?
If you don't intentionally integrate these experiences, you can sort of lose the insights, you can lose the wisdom, you can lose all the potential healing.
What you're missing is the full opportunity to really integrate, and in integration to change your relationship with life.
Powerful experiences are generally part of our lives. The birth of a child, some sort of grief process, the loss of a loved one, even some sort of trip they went on that changed them or transformed them. And what they do, most people, with regards to every journey, is they prepare for it and then they integrate it. Whether they're calling it that or not, that's what they're doing.
Integration is something that we do all the time, from the beginning of birth to the end of life. It's something that actually happens very naturally. The difference is that when we have conscious integration, which is really what we do in a session.
Integration is simply taking the psychedelic experience and making meaning, weaving it back into your life with some practices, with some self-reflection, with some community support. And yeah, maybe a psychedelic-assisted therapist. My name is Vilmarie Fraguada Narlock. I am a clinical psychologist and a psychedelic therapist.
My name is Joseph McCowan. I'm a clinical psychologist, psychedelic-assisted therapist, and researcher.
I'm Marcela Talora, and I'm a psychotherapist and researcher.
psychedelic experiences can be wonderful, can be awe-inspiring, can be earth-shattering.
Powerful, transformational, and deeply unsettling.
Exciting, they can be terrifying, they can be traumatizing.
Psychedelic experiences can be very challenging. It's hard work, requires a tremendous amount of bravery and trust.
The process of integration helps give those really big, powerful, transformative, and sometimes deeply unsettling experiences space for emotions to be felt, for processing to occur, for connection to happen with community, with friends, with nature.
Integration really begins at preparation. So before you even ingest a substance, you really want to be thinking about how you want to make use of the experience.
If somebody's doing a psychedelic experience on their own, can part of the safety setup be integration? The question I would ask would be, who are you going to be with? How do you know the person? Do you trust the medicine? Has the medicine been tested? So all the safety pieces that we really want people to have a good experience, integration needs to be part of that. And I think it's something that gets lost all the time.
The best time to begin is within 24 hours following a psychedelic experience. The nature of experiences can be so strong and powerful that sometimes people are very disoriented and are reorienting a lot in their minds, in their lives, and it's helpful to share what's coming up for them. So during this time, to get support from a therapist or someone who can be available, validating, understanding, and non-judgmental is really crucial.
That initial phase of integration, the sort of post-psychedelic experience, it's a sensitive time. Surrounding yourself with people you trust, maintaining sort of healthy habits is where you want to focus.
The recommendation that I give is to really take advantage of that period of time where they're still very open for that first week after. Don't watch like a violent movie. Try not to go into bright lights. Can you sit, journal, see what's coming up, track your dreams, draw, go in nature, feel the earth under your feet. I mean, integration is an unfolding, and it can't be rushed. You can't force it. So can you give room to the unfolding?
Psychedelic integration is very different from traditional therapy. You kind of have to have way more tools in your toolbox than a traditional therapist would. So it's kind of like having a buffet of options, a little bit of a choose your own adventure based on what it is that you're looking for, what it is that you're healing from, what it is that you're trying to accomplish.
What we want to start with is getting a feel for what people are already connected to or have previously practiced and maybe just feel disconnected from. Journaling can be great just for processing what one is feeling or thinking, but not everyone is a journaler or a writer. So it's not always something new. It's often just them returning to something and deepening connection.
Oftentimes it's really just like noticing, just paying attention to what your body feels like. People will incorporate yoga or dance or other sort of movement practices to help them reconnect with their physical self. It can look like meditation. It can look like quiet sort of internal reflection. It can look like scribbling. It can look like talking to friends or trusted community or a therapist to help put those puzzle pieces together.
The importance of a supportive network during integration is critical. Ideally, it includes members of that person's current support network, friends, family. For some, we see that the only person for a little while in their support network that feels safe and supportive is their therapist.
If someone doesn't have a supportive network, it can feel really lonely. I have a lot of clients who come to me that either their family members don't know that they're doing this work, or it's not really something that is acceptable in their culture or community, being able to find others who are going through similar things can be really helpful to sort of like ground and connect and reinforce the things that you're learning through other people. When it comes to challenging experiences, psychedelic integration is really, really important. Oftentimes what makes it challenging is that it can be confusing or terrifying, or you can't make sense of it. So having that mirror, having that other person or persons or practices in place to help you make sense of it all is really essential, because otherwise you can kind of get stuck. It's not necessarily that it's going to be healed after one integration session, but you'll be pointed in a direction to where you can sort of explore a little bit more, make more sense of it, grow more, learn more from that experience rather than be stuck in the sort of like negative of it.
Sometimes, too, the integration is not necessarily something good. Like it can be, I'm integrating that this trauma really happened to me and that I've spent the last 15 years denying it. And that is a painful thing, right? So it can be very painful and hard. And then part of the integration is the grieving process of this actually did happen.
A lot can come up and people can question, am I regressing? Am I getting worse or am I getting better? Like these questions arise. Sometimes things feel worse before they get better, but it's all in the process of their growth. I like to think of integration as a cycle. We see in nature, growth is often that way as well. It's just like a continuous, ongoing, unfolding process, and it's important that we see it as that.
If you don't do integration, then you're only halfway there. And if that's okay with you to just be halfway there, is that going to happen every time? I'm just halfway there. I'm just halfway there. And then there is no change. Whereas integration then begins like, oh, I arrived somewhere that I didn't know where it was. I didn't foresee. And it changed my life in this particular ways.
I've seen a lot of change and healing in clients and people that I've worked with, from things that are really subtle that end up being really life-changing. I've seen people get really unstuck from patterns and behaviors, and seen people heal from trauma, from depression, from anxiety. If you're doing this work, you're obviously curious enough and wanting to learn some things. Integration is all about growth and learning. It's an invitation to be a lifelong learner.
I had intended to bring you all a gift today from MAPS, which is a psychedelic integration workbook, which is really just an integration workbook, and we'll talk a bit more about that during the course of this conversation. But as those of you who have businesses that do shipping probably understand well, shipping is a little disrupted at the moment, and so they'll be arriving tomorrow, and those workbooks will be here available for you, or you can go to maps.org/integration to find the online resource, and it's a tool that you can use if you're looking to engage in an integration practice that gives you that buffet that Ville-Marie was talking about. So I do hope that you'll return tomorrow to pick up a workbook or go visit online maps.org/integration. I want to start a little interactive, if we may. Can you raise your hand just so we can get a sense of the audience? Raise your hand if you've ever had a psychedelic experience. Seems about right for Southern California. Keep your hand up if you've ever had a difficult psychedelic experience. All right, now raise your hand if you've ever had a difficult life experience, psychedelic or otherwise, that made you feel unmoored, unsettled, that you didn't know how you were going to come back from. I'm sure that we've all had those, right? And the tools that we are going to be talking about today that we use for psychedelic integration are actually an invitation to help us integrate any kind of challenging or even exciting experience. It might be something that feels like nothing but great news, and still approaching it with intention and integration can be a helpful thing. So that is what we are talking about today, and you'll forgive me that I'm turning to my notes just to make sure that I ask the right questions of our panel. Allie, you've said that you don't think of integration as an event, but rather as a process. How can we actualize that for ourselves, and how do you work with your clients to help them actualize that in their own lives?
Yeah, I think kind of to what you were just speaking to, like we can have these peak events or peak experiences, and they can either bring us, well, they will ultimately bring us into wholeness if we are integrating, but they're inherently destabilizing, right? And I'm a new mother, I gave birth. It's all wonderful, also traumatizing. And so I think about integration as a process, that it's not just, okay, we got these answers and we had this overwhelming learning, but every day we are still integrating. He's 15 months old, I'm still integrating the experience, and it will be a lifetime of that, right? And I find I like to talk about this in terms of like daily rituals, right? Like the more resourced we are with like mundane day-to-day life, then when something does come up and kind of, knocks us over a little bit, we're that much more practiced in these rituals or ceremonies because it's part of our daily practice. And I think as a culture, we've really lost a lot of that wisdom, like natural rites of passage, whether that is becoming a mother, witnessing death, right? Any kind of coming of age. We don't have holding places for these things. And so I think psychedelics can really help foster that internally within ourselves and outwardly in our communities.
Thanks. Joseph, you've referred to integration as a bridge, a return. What are we bridging, and to what are we returning? And can you speak to how you support this bridging and returning with your clients and in your practice?
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely layers to this. And if we're talking about the psychedelic experience itself, and the connection between that experience and one's day-to-day life, the experience doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's not an island, or we hope that it doesn't become one. And so, as Ali was speaking to, daily practices, or really ensuring that there's that a connection is made between the experience and one's day-to-day is supported through practice. But what I emphasize when I'm training new therapists or working with clients is that we're often oriented in our society to our to-do lists. And we very much are about what we can do. And we focus less on our to-be list, or ways of being and relating to ourselves, to others, the world. And integration, I feel, is much more about how we are being with ourselves, in our relationships, and our multidimensional relationships, self, others, and the world. And that can take some time for folks to really embody, but it helps to really slow the pace at which they're wanting to see something happen, and come back into more of a natural flow and a natural pace of evolution or growth or change in their process. I like to use a lot of nature metaphors when working with participants or clients because, as we know, and as I've been hearing, that shifts and changes and growth in nature, it's both relatable for people and they can recognize like, okay, that's like a pace I can understand. But we often disconnect ourselves as human beings in our own processes, in our own growth, our own change from just what's natural. And so, I love a good like river analogy. I use this poem actually by Khalil Gibran called Fear, talking about, there's, because a lot of clients come in with anxiety to their psychedelic experience, and it really normalizes anxiety, kind of referring to the river, how it gets anxious going as it flows towards the sea, but really, it's not about the fear disappearing, or going away, but the entering of the ocean essentially becomes the river's experience, and that's when the fear disappears. It's when it is in that ocean or that boundless space. And I really love butterfly metaphors. Often in integration, one is in like kind of a metamorphosis, like a transformation process. But that is like a grueling process. And the butterfly's chrysalis phase is the most grueling phase of its process. It like literally turns into goo and then becomes something completely different. But it's exactly what it needs. I don't think any caterpillar knows exactly what it's getting itself into, when it goes into that process. And people often don't know what they're getting themselves into going into these experiences. But if they could be with the process and really support themselves with like, the so-called like cocoon or chrysalis that they're needing, and be patient with the process, it will support that metamorphosis. And so we're there as, therapists or facilitators, as like that insect keeper who's not interfering too much with the process, but like, there is a presence and a support, but we can't accelerate the process, right? We can be present for it and normalize the pace of it and provide any sort of like containment that could help it along. So I'll stop there for now.
A couple of summers ago, I really needed a day off, y'all. I needed it so badly. And I had a monarch that was emerging from its chrysalis on my front porch. And I thought, what I really need today is to just watch this butterfly emerge and fly away. And so I spent like 4 hours doing that. And what I learned later in the day is that it should only take about 90 minutes. And by my presence there, I had actually slowed it down a bit, right? I had made it less, feel less free to fly away. And so I love that comparison of a therapist being not involving themselves in the process too much, but being there to create a container for safety. This is probably also why I'm not a therapist, but that's a great metaphor. Thanks for sharing that one. While we're on the topic of nature, Kat, you have specifically said that you integrate a lot of nature-based practices and wisdom from plant medicine traditions into your work. One of the cool things about our panel today is that we have folks involved in clinical research and clinical practice and in non-clinical, community-based psychedelic care. So that is you're getting lots of different perspectives from lots of different styles of practice. And so I'm curious if you can tell us a bit about some of the nature-based, specifically the nature-based practices and how you integrate that into your work for your clients.
Does this work? Oh. Yeah, for sure. I'll just start by sharing a little bit about how I came to the nature-based practices and why they speak so much to me and why I'm so passionate about that approach, because there's so many different tools and so many different ways to approach our integration, and each one will speak to each different person based on your lived experience, your culture, your worldview. For me, the lens of nature is what really speaks to me, and I like to weave into other people's lives. So I came in contact with the wisdom traditions of the Andean and Amazonian. Well, there's many different wisdom traditions within those cultures, but I spent about 10 years on and off living in Peru, and during that time, I had a full-on kind of like break in who I was. I'm from Laguna Beach, and I started to have a lot of questions about who I was and what I'm doing on this earth. I had a really bad injury, and my whole sense of reality dropped away. My community, what I do, who I am, how I define myself. And this was without any psychedelic experience. So I started to look for answers, and I found in these wisdom traditions, also in the yogic traditions, this really holistic approach to integrating life experiences as well as psychedelic experiences. And it was mostly based in nature, and this idea that we're not separate from nature. In fact, we are nature, and nature is constantly in communication with us and mirroring things to us if we can learn to listen. Now, not everyone is going to want to walk down that road, but what I also learned from these traditions is, integration as we know it in the Western world is really woven into just daily life. It's repetitive practices, it's everyday practices and rituals. It's done in community as well as individually, and it's woven into this process of interacting with the invisible world, if you will. And so when I work with nature-based practices, what I really try to also center it around is this idea of processing and integrating an experience on a mind, a body, and a soul level. If we're just intellectualizing it, we're not going to actualize it and take in whatever we witnessed, experienced, or saw and actually, live through it in a way where we're not living our trauma, but we're actually living our purpose. We're coming into greater harmony with who we are and how we want to move through the world. So I try to, through nature-based practices, really focus on those three levels. How do I integrate the mind, the body, and the soul, and take a holistic approach? So that can be so many different things, but I mainly work with Andean and Amazonian inspired rituals and practices with, of course, the blessing of teachers and friends, and then I've created my own things on top of that. But what I really try to do is really simple things, like get someone to get outside, tell them, hey, maybe it's an interesting thing to think about that trees have spirits or plants have spirits or energy, and they can commune with you. So sit with a rose or sit with a butterfly in its cocoon, and just open your mind and get curious about what comes up for you, and see how that might relate to what's happening in your life and what you're moving through. And that's where the sense making with someone and within community can come really in handy, because we can have all these insights and all these knowings and all these awarenesses through whether it's dance or a nature walk or an offering and a ritual to the earth. And, we might not know what to do with the awarenesses that come through them, because what we're really doing when we do these rituals is we're allowing the life force to move through us. And when we do that, we start to notice through whether it's a grief we're moving through, loss, or an expansive experience, we notice that if it's a lot for our system, it can get stuck. And so when we allow the life force to start moving through us, we start communing with nature, whether it's even just like in the ritual today, we made an offering of tobacco to the ocean. We're starting a conversation with the invisible world, and things are going to start to move, and we'll start to notice in our body where there's stuckness or emotion will start to come out. That's all just where our life force energy has become a little stagnant. And so what I do is I kind of guide people in really individualized but simple practices to go outside, make that offering, or walk barefoot on the ground. And what I'm really trying to do is invite them into an entire paradigm shift, which I think I learned in indigenous worldview is that healing and integration happens in community. It's an everyday act of how we are and who we are and how we move through the world. Yeah.
Thanks. Oh my goodness, I did not have enough coffee this afternoon. A question came to me. I promise it was brilliant. This panel is titled The Healing Path. And I know that many of us have seen, there was a meme that started going around a couple of years ago that where one axis was healing and the other was time. And rather than a straight line, it was a squiggly line that moved all over, right? Many of us have seen this. We know that it's a path that we walk, and sometimes it feels like we're going back to the same pieces over and over again. But it is a path, not a destination. And that is something that I think is reflected in the comments from all of our panelists here. I'm wondering if, before we open up to Q&A, knowing that we've heard about the power of story today, if you can share a story from your experience or, either as a practitioner, as a clinician, or as a practitioner guiding someone, or in your own life, where an integration process has really made a tremendous difference for someone in their healing path, psychedelic or otherwise.
Yeah, this actually was just popping up for me as Kat was talking. There's something here that we're all referring to with, and you're referring to it as well, just like cycles and paths of healing. And a big part of that is that it's not linear. And when I think of non-linearity, I think of circles. And like so much in our work is circular. We just come back around. I think of preparation, journeys, integration, then we're technically back to preparation and journey, integration, then back. We talk about the circle of life. Indigenous groups, part of the wisdom in those cultures is that they gather in circle. It's non-hierarchical. Sometimes in our society we've gotten away from that. We think less about like a return as progress, or a remembering as progress, or a reconnection as progress, and we consider like accumulation, or like doing something different or something new as what is the aim or the intention of advancement. Like progress is advancement. It's like going to the next level. And in my experience with participants, I'll name one in particular. I won't name them, but they had a powerful disconnection from their body and the natural world, and in our work there was a deepened connection to their body and the natural world in some powerful ways, which unfolded over time. But they shared, after going on a camping trip with friends, just like how powerful an experience of just like dancing around a fire outside with friends was for them, and how they were carrying that experience. And something that they shared was like it felt like everything I needed, but everything our like culture has gotten away from is like, I know it's still available, but this is what people used to do all the time, and it feels so good. So it was powerful to just see that they had that experience and that we're making those connections. And they even made a larger connection. And like a month later, the season was changing, And they were beginning to notice in new ways. Like previous to this period, they hadn't really paid attention that much to like seasonal changes. And they were like, I'm kind of really attuning to this more. And I've like learned about how the sun is like, shifting this way and that, like with the equinoxes and the solstice and all that. And I feel like I want to celebrate these now. And then she was like, remember I referred to like dancing around the fire. I realized like that's always what we're doing. Like our planet is just like, that's what we do. We dance around the fire. And it was like, it was so powerful to see a shift from not being connected to this remembering and this connection. And I imagine sometimes where it is now, and I'm just sure it's, advanced, unfolding, or not advanced, but
Continually unfolding. Yes, absolutely.
I have another idea coming to mind too. And I think another thread that we're all touching on is like more embodiment and like sensory and felt experiences, because we are in our culture really cut off, right? So much intellectualizing, progress, linear. What are we gonna get, And I think a lot of our kind of duty in this work is to slow down, remember the cycle. I like that word, remember, like we're remembering our bodies. And so I really focus on somatic practices, like sensory. And I recently worked with someone who was also extremely cut off, due to trauma, and like entering their body was difficult, but they had these amazing talents throughout their life, cooking, and she was a producer, music producer. And so using some of that as integration has been like really amazing, and to remind her to come back into those practices. And like what's evolved is she's tending to her kind of inner child that she sort of visited in this peak experience. And instead of serving, her dinner parties that took a lot out of her, she's literally making a meal every Friday for herself and for her inner child who's, not at the table. But that little girl gets a whole special meal, and there's candlelight, and she sits with her. And in reciprocity, I get the pictures of this. So I get to see this amazing meal. And what's, I think, again, in the process and the kind of practice, instead of just, it's not a one-time event. It's maybe Fridays she doesn't want that grilled cheese, It's like she wants the, whatever, soup. So I think those practices land more, there's just more bang for the buck, Instead of, okay, I got this one little thing and now it's gonna change me, right? We can have these events, but if we don't integrate them into our life, then they're not part of our like larger being.
Kat?
So many things have come to mind. I really resonate with everything that's been shared, this idea. I take it past the circle to the spiral too, in which Ali has this beautiful spiral shell up here. And one thing I often tell people that I'm working with is the more we, take our process seriously and walk with the things that we've seen and not push them away, but really work with little pieces of it every day, the more our capacity to hold hard and joyful experience expands. So the next time, we don't heal something, then it's gone. It's like the next time it comes around, my capacity to meet this thing has changed. And so I can go a level deeper. There's really nothing, there's nowhere to get, nowhere to go. We're never gonna fully heal everything or even that one thing. But our ability to, touch on it in a different way, access it in a different way, and understand and embody it in a different way is going to change as we expand and change ourselves. And I also wanted to touch on this point of community. I think a lot of us are talking about, these individuals, and this work also, I think, is so important. And in the video we talked about it a little bit too, like who do we go to when these things happen, hard things, exciting things, who can meet us and hold that for us? I think that, therapy and grief counselors and joy counselors and all these different things are kind of like that, just the first step. And I'll go back to what I was saying before. I really think that what we can do is look at these ancient traditions and ancient practices and see that that rituals, rites of passage, ways of being that are just about integrating, because integration is happening all day long in everyday life. It's not just about big experiences. So this was all like woven into daily life. And how can we shift and start to create a society that meets people? Because not everyone is going to look for or even know that the tools and resources that all of us are talking about exist. The average person doesn't know when they're in grief or loss or extreme unity consciousness where to go and what to do with that. They don't even know, maybe I should look for a psychedelic assisted therapist or a non-traditional healer that might, guide me in this rite of passage. So how can we construct a society and start making shifts that allow, people to know that these things exist and that it's not just people that are on a spiritual path, but everybody has a right to access this. And in fact, it's part of a healthy society and a healthy world that when we come into deeper connection with ourselves, we can then meet other people and, be that grief tender or that portal or just that ear to listen where we can meet people with compassion instead of shying away from the hard things because we haven't met it in ourselves. And I see that a lot, and I've experienced it a lot in my own journey. And that's kind of what I feel my purpose is in this world of integration and ceremony and ritual, along with my partner and our bigger project here and around the globe. But I will say, as an example of something that's maybe a little closer to home, I work very deeply with a lot of women. There's one woman in particular I'm thinking about that I've worked with in ritual and ceremony for 4 years now, and she has experienced very deep-seated stuck energy. I don't like to use the word trauma, but trauma, for lack of a better word, around a violation that happened in her past, which is quite common, and I'm sorry that's an uncomfortable thing to talk about, but it's something that comes up a lot in this work. And she went through layers and layers. She did all the different psychedelic therapies. She worked with me, worked with my partner, worked with other practitioners, talk therapy, somatic movement, everything, and she still wasn't really making a lot of movement. It was still really driving her life in a subconscious way. And so, I was watching the layers peel off, the layers peel off, the layers peel off, and I finally got to a place where I was like, okay, I think that we can go to the next step, which is really allowing her to move some of this out of her body and reclaim some of her mental space, reclaim her own body as herself, come into an act of deeper self-love and self-compassion, and maybe eventually get to forgiveness. And so what I started to do when I saw her in that place was, I had already been working with her really deeply around ritual and what I call is tending the invisible, working in the invisible, all these tiny rituals that we can do that eventually don't look like anything but add up to a lot. And I saw what I was able to do is see in her, okay, she's really unrooted. Her root chakra is totally off balance. So how are we ever going to access anything past that? We have to create a sense of safety. So rather than tell her that or try to do a bunch of practices that push her to that, I just had her drink a simple tea infusion of an herb a wild weed, an herb that I know brings deep, 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 deep soul nourishment to the body as well as relaxes the nervous system. And she got to state after a month of drinking this tea, this plant, and she's like, why am I drinking this? I'm like, just wait, because we're about to go into a journey together. And afterwards, she's like, why was I drinking this tea? And, she's processing her experience, and all this unlocking is happening in her sacral area, in her heart. She's feeling for the first time. She's starting to sing, which is something I really encourage. She's starting to move things in her body that before it's like she was frozen in time. And I explained to her, I'm like, once, this herb, this plant was rooting you. It was creating a deep, deep, deep sense of safety, not only in yourself, but in the fact that you are held by the earth. Because we're working with these plants and living spirits that, if we work with them intentionally, are much more than something that's nourishing our tissues or creating a nervous system relaxation, but actually creating a deep anchor in the earth. And when we're anchored in the earth body, our body can relax, and then we can do the work. So it's an ongoing process, but that's just something, it's really small, it seems insignificant, but for me it was a huge, huge win to witness, and a big part of why I was like, yeah, this is why I do what I do.
And you're going to be serving that tea, right?
And we have tea afterwards.
I believe that we're out of time and are not going to be able to do Q&A, but I will be around for a bit. You can find loads of information at maps.org. And I will say, if you are curious about psychedelics and are unfamiliar, know that there are risks. It can be very challenging psychologically and sometimes physically. You should make sure that you're educating yourself first. And practicing harm reduction if you find yourself curious about any of this. And there is an enormous amount of potential for healing and growth with these medicines, with these drugs, and with some of the practices that we cultivate within psychedelic practice that don't need psychedelics at all. It's not for everybody. So thank you all for your time and attention. Thank you all for your stories and your insights. It was a beautiful way to wrap up. Thank you, Kat.